the next best thing. Hey guys, want to jump on and do a quick little chat on a topic, as far as we may not always be, in the alignment with love at all times. And sometimes, in fact, we might even be doing things that are harmful or toxic, not only to ourselves, but to other people without even being aware or present of it, because it is where we are in the moment of it that we're expressing or doing whatever it is that we're doing, which is the unconscious, the shadow aspect of ourselves, and the awareness that we are, because that's what we know, or where we are in the experience of it. Now with the experience, sometimes we do things that are not in alignment with love, but it's the next best thing, right, that we can do to get us into alignment with being in love. And so we're always in the evolution and seeking the higher consciousness, no matter where we are on the timeline, right? And so you have what I've talked about before, the timeline, which is love, which there is no time by source, but it is a fullness of love, and then the absence of love. And so wherever you are in the streams of consciousness of that is our actions and our thoughts and our beliefs and everything that we're playing off of in those constructs, right? And so it could be very limiting or not, if you're, depending where you are, right? And so the topic is relating to, sometimes we just do things that may not be in alignment with that, but it's the next best thing that we can do, that we can find in the moment. And so it doesn't make it right or wrong, good or evil, and no need for judgment on it. But it's what we can find in the moment that makes us feel good. And whether that's being angry at another person, hurting, hitting, whatever the actions or thoughts that we're taking in that moment, could be stealing, could be, whatever actions, could be cheating, could be anything, along those lines. Depending on where we are, we may be in a place where we're really struggling, or even the fact if we're in a place of, depression. What do people do when they're in a state of depression? They sleep, they hibernate, they get away, they isolate, different things like that to get away from the situation. They use their coping skills or what they have available to them, what they know, right? And what they know is only where they are on the timeline in that space at that time. They don't know anything else other than that, what it is. And a lot of that stems from, where we come from, what our past is, what is our experience. If we have a toxic environment, it's hard to get out of that space because that's all that we know, right? It's like that, the cave scenario where when you live in this cave and you haven't gone outside the cave, you only know that, right? And so it's until we step out of that we can see something else. And so until we see something else, that's all we know in that moment, and that's the expression of whatever that is in the form of it at that moment. And so there's no judgment from the other side on that. It's just the expression of where you are, trying to understand it, navigate it, and move out of it, right? And so whatever comes of it, from it, to be in an expression is the form that it's taking in the moment. And so it may not be that somebody can meet you with love. It may be just that they express it in the way that they express it, in the form that they're expressing it, which may not always be in alignment with love because they can't be in that space. But they are in the next space of what they can be to meet you in love, to what they know is love, for themselves, because it's making them feel good, if that makes sense. And it's not love per se as we know love to be, from the other side or from source, but it's the next best stage of love that they can be for themselves and where they are in their moments, from, what's been their experience or what's been played out for them in the game of life, right? And so from that experience where you are, what is the next best thing can be from anywhere. It can be from any timeline. It can be like the sharing of anger, hatred, hurting another, not to say it's so you can feel better, but it is the next best thing to feel better instead of holding it in until letting it out. But in the process, of getting it out, we may want to look at that at some point in our lives and make the amends that we need to make once we've stepped out of that space, if we ever get to that point. Um, and, taking on the responsibility for our actions at that point, which leads us into, doing a life review, because when you go home, you're going to do a life review anyway. And so it's always good to do your life reviews as you're going through life, and you're looking at it now as you are in the moment from where you were in the past. Because if you're looking at where you are now, you've evolved from the past. And so you're now currently in the moment. And where are you? Are you still that same person that you were then, or are you a different person now? And how can you see that from this perspective of where you are or where you were? And how can you change and manipulate that and change that perspective? So you're changing the energy and vibration around that, and you're healing and letting go of those things that's been of the past, right? Which brings you up to the present moment. So you're no longer tied in the past. It brings you forward into the present moment, so you can move on and move forward with something else and be in a different space of awareness, not replaying it out from a different consciousness, because we're always back and forth in between different consciousness as we're going along the timeline. And so if there's something that's been in the past that's been not dealt with, we'll get pulled back into that from time to time to look at it whenever we're ready to deal with it and look at it. So as we evolve along the path, the things that we've done in the past, it's always good to look at it and see it from a different view and make whatever amends that we need to make, or what to change it, however we want to change it as our perspective now in the moment, from where we are now versus where we were then, so we can let that go, right? And so when we've made the amends, we can do that in a lot of different ways. We can verbally do it in writing, intention, self-healing, reach out to that person. There's many different ways that we can make those amends, from where we are now in the moment, of what we've done, or done, expressed, or how we done it. And again, it's not really about what's right or wrong. It's just the fact that if we are able to look and see what we've done, that we've created, which isn't always in alignment with love, based on where we were at the moment in the timeline, we can change and shift that consciousness of ourselves and where we are, and moving on into another higher frequency, for the future self, right? Because when we go home, we do a life review, and then from there, we base our next life on that. So how are we going to manage that life, right? Are we going to continue that patterns, or are we going to, close that book on it and put it on the shelf and be like, okay, I completed that. I don't need to do that again, or don't need to keep reworking that or keep rehashing that, from all different perspectives. Now, we do that actually from different perspectives, so we can see the perspective of all perspectives, right? And so from seeing that perspective, we want to know how we're doing that, and it's from changing the energy and vibration around it. So with that being said, our frame of reference is where we are in the moment to what feels better in the moment, depending on where we are on the stream of consciousness. So if we're not feeling good, if we're feeling sad, down, depressed, angry, unhappy, unsatisfied, struggling in our relationships, at our job, as far as abundance, our health, what is the next best thing? What's going to get us there? And so, like, even people who are struggling with physical ailments, what's the next best thing, right? Some people will just turn to medications and not deal with their situation, but it's what makes them feel better in the moment. Somebody who might be having marital issues may choose to be unfaithful. People who are struggling with their career may just end up quitting and not do a transition from one to the other. So it's just whatever feels better in the moment, but it's not always going to be in the goodness of love and the right reasons, right? But it's what feels good in that moment to do, right? And so it just brings you back to, okay, where am I in that? What am I doing? What am I choosing? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I realizing here in this concept? What is it that is the next best thing? And am I doing it in alignment with love, right? So we want to take a look at it from that perspective, and we can look back at it look back at it, as I was saying, from the perspective of love, where we are now versus where we were then, we can see how we were, and we evolved through that timeline. From there to here, we're now uh, in a different place. We've evolved from a perspective into a different one, and so we can see it from another perspective. And so as we change and grow and we release that, as we grow, we can move into another space. And as we're in, another space, which would actually be in the future, which actually isn't happening yet until now, in the moments, because there's only now. But when we get there and we've changed and manipulated from this moment and point in time, it'll be a different perspective then than it is now, because we're always evolving from the perspective view, which can be challenging if you're not understanding and aware of how that is and how that works, or how we can manipulate and change it from those different perspectives. So when we take a look and do our life review, in review of itself, we can change and manipulate it now. We don't have to do it when we go home and pass over into another life and then come back to be reborn. And why would you, right? Because then you have to go back all through the same thing and then maybe forget in a different lifetime. Whereas you can do it now while it's fresh in your memory, you remember to do it, things that we've done and acted upon and created in this lifetime. And to help manipulate and change that, so you don't have to go pass over, do the life review, and then come back in and potentially forget um, what it is that we were working on, and then just replay it out again, right? From a different perspective and review. So we have options, right? We don't have to wait. We can do it now in the moment. And when we do it and change it from this perspective, we're seeing it from the timeline perspective, not the after timeline perspective, which is two different things, right? And so from that perspective, we're allowing ourselves to come back in and replay it out again from different perspective of the experience, not from outside of the experience. Because once you're outside of the experience, if you do it now in this moment, you're outside of the experience of what was, unless you're carrying it forward with you into the moment, the present moment, and keep replaying it out. But if we're looking at it from a time frame or timeline where we're not in it, then we can see it and view it and change it and transform it. So there's different ways of looking at it and how you're doing it and going about it. And so ideally, it's good to look at things in this lifetime and, do your own life review, right? And see how it is. Step into the frame of love, right? And look at it from that perspective. How would Source be looking at this situation, whereas where I was or I am now in the moment, and change it. And so am I acting or being from the highest space, my higher self in this moment, to where I can change it into something else, which when we transform something, it's alchemy, right? So a lot of people refer to that. But in the process of making change in our lives, we're actually freeing ourselves from the past, right? And so we're allowing a new energy and vibration to come in to change and manipulate and formulate into something else. So you can have or start a new path in the ending of something else, right? And so when something ends, something new evolves, right? And so where it is on the path that you're evolving from, when you change it, you're evolutioning into that, creating something else or something new. And so the process of self-alchemy is, the processing of it, allowing yourself to be in that space, understanding it, knowing it, seeing it, being truthful with yourself, being transparent, and allowing yourself to make the right choices and actions, looking at it from the place of how Source would look at it, right? And so how is Source presenting you this situation to look at it from the new place that you are now versus where you were from that place, because we're always evolving, right? And so again, sometimes we don't always act in alignment with love, and that's okay. There's no judgment based on that, only what we are basing it on, how we judge ourselves, how others judge us. There's no right and wrong based on Source from the other side, because it's all an evolution, right? And it's knowing itself, evolving through itself, being itself, seeing through itself, the awareness that's creating so that we are activating and being from a different place, which is higher consciousness, right? And so we're all evolving on the timeline at different rates, different speeds, understanding, knowing, experiencing, feeling, being, on all different levels, right? And so not beating ourselves up over it, but taking a look at it and taking action accordingly to the space of love, and being in that space and awareness that you truly are, because that is your true state, which is love. And so when we're being from that space based on that, we're able to see it from a different perspective. And so when we can change our perspective, because we have the control, we're never a victim. We only make ourselves a victim, right? And so when we can change our perspective, we change our awareness, and from where we are acting from, which creates a whole new reality that we get to experience and play out in as a role. And so this topic just came up because the little channeling that dropped in, it said, sometimes we do things that are not always in alignment of love, but is love in the end. The intention we give to it, which is where it is being in the moment, the heart of being, which is the next best thing. And so understanding that no matter where we are on the timeline, we're always evolving towards the next best thing, which is the feeling good of it. Because as you know, the emotional scale, you have, from what is it, love and to fear, but it's where you are on the timeline. From my understanding, it's love to emptiness, to the lack of the emptiness of it. So wherever you are on the timeline is the next best thing that we're seeking to find, either intentionally or unintentionally. And that is where we act from, is that space. And again, it's either, whether we're depressed or you're in a bad relationship, and the actions that you take, and whether you need to get divorced, or if you choose to have an affair, or if you have a job or you need money and you choose to steal, or or you've been in a toxic environment and you choose to leave, or you choose to act that out in karma, to learn from it, not because it's a punishment or you're going to reap it, but to learn from it. It's really the next best thing that we're reaching for, which in the moment feels good because you're expressing and releasing that. But it's not that it's actually feeling good, like in bliss, but it's the next best state of being, right? And which we don't really realize, as we look at it as bad, in our expression of what we're doing or what we're creating, or actions that we're taking. But it's always in the name of the next best thing, right? Because where you are is the realization of where you are, and the expression of it in form to be where you are in that, to express it so you can be in the next best thing. Because if you're feeling, say, in fear, what's the next best thing up from fear, right? And so you could be angry, you could be hateful, you can be, and these are the expressions. And so when we're in that space, we have that expression, and then we have those actions, because thoughts, feelings, emotions, actions occur simultaneously as a reaction to something else, which is performing its function and realizing itself to do that, which is the navigating through it. And so we play out these roles that we're experiencing in that way. So I hope that makes sense. I know it kind of goes around and around, but if you've been in those situations and you've been struggling with certain things, and you take actions of something which isn't really in alignment with love, but is the next best thing, then you'll understand what I'm talking about, right? And so it's not all bad, right? It's to help you get out of that situation of where you are, because we're always unconsciously seeking. It's kind of like a built-in navigation system, per se, where we always are choosing whether we're conscious of or not conscious of the next best thing, whatever's going to make you feel good in that moment. So, and again, like if you're depression, what are you going to do? You're going to maybe eat a gallon of ice cream. And why? Because it makes you feel good in that moment, right? And so that can be expressed in many different ways depending on where you are, what you're doing. And doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it what it is, and it's the feel good. It's like a feel good. I don't want to say a hormone, but it's the feel good engrainment that we all have on a energetic and natural level, that is inspired when we know that we're not in a place of feeling good, it creates situations unconsciously to help us feel good. And so it satisfies us in the moment so we can get into a different space and out of that space, right? So if that makes sense. But that the little, peek into how that works, beyond that. So you have an idea, but, you don't want to beat yourself up and because you're just going to keep digging yourself a hole in it if you're beating yourself up. If you've done something and you want to just keep staying in it, perpetuating it, instead of looking at it and making your amends or making changes to what that was that it evolved into, right? Because we're changing along timeline. We're always in a different place. We're never in the same place ever at any time, because there's only now and every moment and every second of the day of our experience in our lifetime, as we're evolving. So we can always look back at it and look at it from a different space and put yourself in a space of love, just like you would do on a life review once you've passed over, and do it now, right? Just don't beat yourself up because you're going to be perpetuating that and keep creating that and moving through that and kind of constantly working through that. You want to look at it, step back and look at it from your perspective now. Do your healing and your alchemy from that, whatever that entails, and whatever you feel like you need to do, whatever you're guided to do through that. And again, if you need help with that, I do coaching sessions, and we can help navigate that together. You can just reach out to me. All right. Happy journeys. Thanks for tuning in.